17s.
See how many people we get for Thursday.
It's always a much smaller crowd.
Yeah, we got equal company representation right now, at least. That's a good thing.
Didn't Joe want to talk about a bunch of things?
So.
Inline Buildpacks, I heard, right?
Yeah, inline Buildpacks. I'm really interested in that. Root Buildpacks are, I know, lots of people have lots of opinions. That's going to be, we need to get more feedback, I think.
Yeah, I think the tough parts is just a lot of different use cases around it too. Like what people want and everything. There's a trade-off there.
Yeah, I agree.
Is root Buildpacks like a blocker for 1.0 for you, Stephen?
1.0? I don't think it's a blocker for 1.0 because I think we can layer it on top, right? The blockers for 1.0 for me are just breaking changes, which I don't think we've made all of them yet. Like maybe the bill of materials being a separate thing from the build plan, that might be a blocker for 1.0, even though it's like, doesn't seem like it's as important. I just want to get all the breaking changes out of the way.
The app Buildpack was never officially.
Can't hear you.
Sounded really far away. I can just barely hear you.
I think it's
a different mic.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now? No.
Nope. It's like you're at a campsite that's a different campsite than our campsite and talking or something.
Yeah, I guess I only bring up the 1.0 thing because it feels like such a necessary thing, not from a API change, but more of a marketing kind of out the gate if we're going to market CMB more heavily for 1.0.
Yeah, that makes sense. It would definitely be really nice to have for 1.0. I just I don't know if it's worth blocking on it or not. It's going to be really complicated to implement, and I have a feeling we haven't arrived at something that everybody has provided enough feedback on and feels comfortable with yet.
How's my sound now?
Excellent.
Audible? I was going to say that apt was never officially supported anyways, right? So root wasn't critical even in V2B.
The app build pack in the V2 lands, both Heroku and Cloud Foundry, like only worked for some things because it would tear the packages apart and assume that they didn't have any, absolute path references. It's like it could never be supported, really. The nice thing about root build packs is they would allow real apt packages to be installed to system locations in a supported way. like as part of the build process. And so it's, like different things sort of that we could officially support. But it's contentious because it's like it breaks rebasing, like the droplet and bottom part model don't work, and so you have to either not rebase or do a combination of rebasing and installing packages, and then you have to make sure that the things you install are ABI compatible, right? So it's a whole whatever it is.
Can of worms, I think is the phrase you're looking for.
That sounds pretty good.
Yeah, I guess to like answer your other point about like it wasn't needed in V2, at least from Heroku, and I imagine probably similar from the Cloud Foundry side, it was a top ask for the entirety of the Heroku platform that people wanted a way to do it. And if the app build pack didn't work because you are breaking out part of package, like the answer was write a build pack to install that one package and figure out how to build and compile it yourself and make it work with build packs. And that's I think it was a pretty subpar experience. I mean, some customers really loved the platform enough to deal with it, but I think a lot of people probably just didn't bother and moved off, or figured a way to maybe not depend on that package. And I think in the context of Cloud9 build packs too, where to some degree we're like competing with Dockerfile. I mean, not exactly, but like Dockerfile is a competitor that makes it significantly easier to do that.
Plus one. Sorry.
Are there any new faces? Do you want to just jump right into this, get that out of the way, and keep going with this discussion?
Yeah, let's run through. We don't do RFC review or release planning on these days, right? So
Right.
Any new faces here?
Doesn't look like it.
Oh, all right. This is going to be fun. I know McNew and I were talking earlier, and even we have some disagreements about things.
Nice to hear that, but like I was talking to Jesse yesterday, and I feel like I need to take a step back from the whole root build pack proposal, because I've sort of, as you guys were talking, like I've lost sight of the thing that was really important, which was installing packages, right? And my hope was to have this really generic construct that allowed you to do anything but was still familiar and was easy to use. And I feel like as we're uncovering restrictions that we need to place and then others that we just want to place on it, it might not be really solving the problem that I wanted it to solve. And in fact, Jesse was like batting around some like, what if it looked like this in your project toml kind of stuff. And while I don't want to introduce new constructs, we're talking about mixins a lot. And I think what I really want is to double down on mixins, potentially where your app can require mixins and, that kind of thing. And that's not a new construct. And it doesn't mean we can't have root build packs that only run, from the builder or whatever. But I feel like I need to take a step back and really think about that, because that's 99% of what we're trying to solve here, right? So that's just been going through my head, like the last 24 hours, basically.
That's how I've started to feel. As soon as, Emily, you brought up the idea of, you could use the build plan construct in order to dynamically convey mixins that could either be, met by the stack or by the root build pack, right? I started to feel a lot like, Joe, what you're talking about right now, where it's like, that seems really elegant because it means you can bake it in or you can let it happen dynamically, right? Like that feels really right, and you can restrict it to ABI compatible packages, but then giving people root build packs as the sharp tool where they can break other things, like it almost feels like that's a different conversation, if that makes sense. Not one that maybe is bad to have, but
Do you not feel in that for both the two of you that root build packs allow you to build like that app build pack that can integrate with that build plan? I guess like if you double down this mixin thing, which I agree is like a really cool mechanism because it's a thing that exists. We have build plans that can also fit, so it seems to align well with not a ton of changes. What is the thing that process interprets that build plan if it's not a root build pack, like an app build pack or a yum build pack, or etc.?
I'm not even. It might be a root build pack. I'm not even saying that, but I'm like, I think what I'm saying is, if we're gonna put those restrictions on root build packs. Let's just do that. And then you don't use a root build pack necessarily. Like, let's stop worrying about like, how do I put this root build pack in my list of build packs and to install an app package. Like, let's say like as an end user, I just want to add this mixin, and that might be a root build pack behind the scenes. Still, that's where I haven't gone that far, but like, I think what I'm saying is I think the real
Muted, sorry.
I think the real interface that I want is the mixins, not the root build pack.
Yeah,
This conversation, sorry, this like really resonates with me. I think I sort of want this to use the mixin concept rather than the build pack concept, and like maybe you can do both. But if I had to pick, I think this should slot into the world of mixins. So maybe like rather than moving mixins into the build plan and making this happen here, we instead pull this concept out to play in the mixin space instead. I don't know exactly what that looks like, but I think it will make things simpler and allow us to restrict them in a way that doesn't cause us a lot of.
Can users today specify mixins that their app needs?
A user can select a builder that already has some mixins baked onto it and select a builder of a different size depending on, like on the Cloud Foundry side, or sorry, on the Paketo side, we provide a base builder and a full builder, and the full one just has a ton more packages on it, right? And so that's the only mechanism that an app developer can use to select something with additional packages. It's very coarse-grained and expensive on the platform side to support 57 images with all different sets of packages for different app combinations.
Yeah, I guess this is like the use case maybe that Mac Manu was talking about yesterday, and it's why. Well, while I like the mixin thing, I still think like there's that use case of like the end user needing some esoteric package as well. That probably, if mixin's in the primitive they are now, maybe is probably not 100% there of what I would want for an end user. Probably needs to be adjusted a little bit.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that we don't still have a mechanism for that, right? Like, and maybe that is still root build packs, but then if we also double down on the mixins thing, we might be more comfortable with some of the heavy restrictions that we want to put on root build packs, if that makes sense. Like, we can go ahead and put all those restrictions on it, but 99% of users can still just, add libpq to their mixins or whatever. And then that one user that's like, oh, I need this specific version of FFmpeg and I need a special root build pack to install it or something.
I think we want like a dynamic interface for mixins. So an app user can specify a mixin, or another build pack can request a mixin to be provided. But I don't know if that needs, the provider needs, it might be safer if the provider is something that we ship on the stack that can dynamically provide mixins rather than something you can add to any builder and can't do anything.
Terrence, what you said before of like mixins don't completely solve the problem, because what if I have an esoteric package that's doesn't preserve ABI compatibility? Did I understand that problem correctly?
Just that I think in the way that mixins are done now, like as a end user, I need as an app developer who's not a build pack author or a operator who manages builders or images, like I want a way to not just select a stack image, because maybe I need some package that doesn't exist on any of the stacks that are provided by my platform. But it's like kind of that end user use case that is the last one on your app image extension one. Like I think mixins are probably still the right mechanism, but they need to be probably, like Emily's saying, pulled out or tweaked a way where like I can have input and then maybe whether it's a root build pack or something else that is able to then dynamically add that package in as part of that process, maybe.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I think I thought you were saying, well, not even, mixins only do LTS things on Bionic. Can we do more than that? I totally agree with the point that dynamic functionality there should totally exist. I wanted to add though that because we can define what mixins mean for different stacks, we can have a prefix for Bionic that says, like the danger prefix where, you could put, kind of whatever you want there, and then it taints the image with like, this isn't ABI compatible and we could treat it differently. Like I think mixins as a concept could really be extended to cover like all of these packaging kind of use cases if we decided to go that direction in the future without us needing kind of arbitrary, code execution.
Was it?
Yeah, I also wonder for root build packs if you want a non-ABI thing, like maybe you don't use a mixin and like you have to provide some type of root build pack that does that, and that's like a separate
Yes. And
thing that
right, and then we're really comfortable with all these restrictions because it's not ABI compatible, and like if that just straight breaks rebase, fine. Like that's the trade-off you're making, and it's only a very, very small percentage of people.
But the CA certs flow, does mixins, that's not gonna, you're not gonna use a mixin to do like custom CA certs, right? Like you're gonna need to potentially copy certs from your like workspace and then like run an arbitrary like cert update command, right?
Maybe for root build packs that preserve ABI compatibility, there's some flag that says, hey, this has done something safe and you can rebase against it, and like really rebase against it, not like replay the root build pack, but like, nope, the base image just swaps, versus a flag that's like not, because CA certs fit really well in there. They don't actually need, you don't have to replay the CA certs on the base image in most cases, right? Unless you're worried about getting updates to the CA certs, right, which don't happen very often.
Yeah, there probably still are cases where it's technically not safe, even though it's usually safe.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, like I kind of go back to, I really want like a partial Docker file. Like what I really want is the context of like my app to be run before all the Buildpack stuff, so I could like copy files out to the root system, like inspect like an apt file, and then run a bunch of packages. I don't really want to think about provides, requires. I don't really want to. I would be all right with like, also throwing out some metadata for like mixins to be like, yeah, okay, the stack only had these mixins, and I just did this, which provided more mixins. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like an arbitrary like escape hatch execution is necessary for some use cases.
I think I really like that idea. Arbitrary escape hatch, and that escape hatch can do things like break rebasing, but it doesn't have to, right? Yeah, exactly. McNew, I think you keep trying to find a good place to interject. I want to make sure.
Yeah, I keep trying to think about how to get my thoughts. I think what I found very confusing about the old proposals that we were treating root build packs is two things. Kind of this like concept very similar to what build packs already are, which is distributable by anyone and replayable on any compatible stack. But it's also providing very contractual changes to the underlying stack and perhaps even providing mixins. And those two use cases like would behave very differently. Perhaps there is like adding mixins that make a lot of sense and probably doesn't want to break rebasability, but inherently like we can't think of all the use cases users might want, and they're going to want to be able to just run things as root arbitrarily in front before their build starts. And we have no idea what that is, but it's certainly plausible. So it seems like if we broke out some mechanism to like specify mixins being required, that wouldn't mean that we wouldn't need root build packs. It just could mean that root build packs is an incredibly sharp knife. And the second you open up that hatch, guarantees go out the window about providing rebase later. But I still would be a little concerned if, it seems like we should make that a very clear separation. As soon as root build packs get involved, all bets are off. We can't do rebases. And if stacks themselves have a mechanism to provide mixins, it seems like we should, I would advocate we separate that concept from the root build pack.
Would you be okay with root build packs expressing whether or not they can do you can do rebases? And I'm not talking about upgrades. I'm talking about rebases. Like the build pack takes responsibility for only editing empty directories or files that are okay to be permanently overridden. I'm curious.
I'd have to ponder that, but I might question why don't just stacks provide some hooks to do that.
I think that's okay too. It's just, it seems like a sharp knife that applies during build per app could be really useful. But once it's a sharp knife, like we shouldn't put any like root build pack author decides, what the restrictions are, if that makes sense.
I'd have to think more about it, but
Cool.
Off the top of my head, it feels like we should just let that be a sharp knife, and over time, if users request it, we can find ways to like de-sharpen parts of it.
Yeah, you can imagine
Also,
a really
if-
slim image where you just install a bunch of packages. But if you're the stack maintainer, maybe you've kind of allowed mixins and all those packages to be installed on top of a very slim image. And like Stephen, you're saying, like it's safe to rebase because you know that you're installing these packages the recommended way, and they're all LTS and ABI compatible as long as you have the same, the same guarantee, the same packages between builds.
I was kind of thinking for the root build pack case, if it installed packages, then like I was imagining the safety that the root build pack could express is that you can rebase out from under its changes, not that you can replay the root build pack's changes. And the reason is that and we should leave mixins as the sole way to do safe, like replay the changes and then you're allowed to rebase out from under it.
Or rebase -F, where it's like it won't work until you force it.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
like sort of the other way from the build pack saying, like build pack can say, yeah, maybe I compatible, trust me. Or the end user can be like, yeah, I'm just gonna see if it works.
Yep.
It's interesting because like with our introduction of trust builders, so now we're kind of extending that concept to have other things that are trusted or untrusted. So I like the -F like concept in that case.
I think if we move dynamic provisioning of mixins and maybe adding CA certs as well into some sort of stack extension that app developer can opt into or a build pack at detect time can dynamically opt into, I'd like to start there. And then if we know the solution for the arbitrary escape hatch is going to be different, I think we can delay that a little bit more. Like we can decouple these things a bit.
That makes.
I don't think that's as pressing as the CA certs and operating system packages.
For some reason, I still really like the concept of root build packs dealing with the mixins via the build plan or something. It just seems like a nice, elegant thing. And it just seems that maybe you just need a way to differentiate between the sharp razor tool or the kind of more extensible thing that is more safe.
What if instead of it being a root build pack that read that out of the build plan, instead we add a new section to the build plan where build packs can write down mixins and then we call the mixin thing before we continue the build after detection. But we don't have to provide an arbitrary way for people to put root build packs on the system. It hooks into something that ships on the stack itself.
I think to Terrence's point, like everything we've discussed here is a separate mechanism. It feels like a root build pack could fulfill that mechanism if the root build pack were configurable to be able to fill that mechanism. I don't know. That's.
Yeah, same here. Like, I mean, I think I understand what you're saying, Emily, but I feel like it's actually not that much further of a leap to just separate what you're describing from lifecycle or whatever, and just make it a build pack. But then we don't have to worry about like the things I was asking in that last comment on the RFC PR, where it's like, well, how do we make this easier for end users or whatever? It's just a very restrictive mechanism.
Maybe it's like there are stack root build packs that can install packages and then get replayed, right?
Yeah, I even thought about changing it to stack packs or something where it's, yeah.
And then there are rebase safe root build packs that add like CA certs and you can just rebase out from under them and you assume they're okay, sharp tools with no restrictions. And then there are normal root build packs that just break rebase.
I still find the concept of just putting on the stack pretty compelling because it seems to just really conflate the root build pack concept, because even though they sound very similar, the switches about whether or not this is a sharp knife or this is like a supported one really drastically change the behavior of the build pack.
So Matt, you're saying that you like the idea of it, the mechanism not being any kind of build pack. Is that correct?
Yeah.
You can even call it a stack build pack if you want to call it a build pack, but they have to ship actually on the stack images. It's not something you can add to a builder. The stack is bringing the contract, and therefore, because the stack said, this is my contract, we will trust it and treat it differently.
Yeah, and that is what I'm saying. But I guess, yeah, what I'm saying is I'm way more comfortable with those kinds of heavy restrictions if we still have a more convenient way to expose that to the end user.
Yeah, it's like a stack pack, and then there's a root build pack. Those are different. That feels kind of, catchy or something. Or
Yeah,
like
I definitely want
understandable.
to think about that some more, but I've been thinking about it. So
I think, like I've said this a few times, but to me, the key thing here that opened up a lot of doors is the idea that the build pack can express the mixins it needs dynamically during detect, and that can be satisfied either by stack pack, whatever you want to call it, or by the mixins baked on the stack. Like, I feel like that concept is the thing to expand on to solve the problem, because it's so seamless for the developer, right? And the
build pack author. Yeah.
And the platform author gets to decide how much they want to pre-optimize versus post-optimize, right? It's a really nice sliding scale. It makes me very excited. Sorry.
Yeah, to David's point, it is a lot of build packs. I think if we do it right, though, it's just names, and they appear very much as similar constructs, especially the stack pack, root pack thing. Like, I think it's more about where they're used and where they're allowed. There will definitely be a difference in appearance, I guess, maybe not appearance, but in the implications of like a root build pack and a regular build pack. But I'm hoping that these different things we're talking about really aren't that different. It's just the restrictions that we put on them or where they run or something.
The builder to be extended. So I guess they would just recreate that builder without that root, like stack build pack. How would that work?
You cut off a little of the first part.
Meaning
but
you're dealing with some organization that doesn't want any, I don't know, that is very happy with the OS packages they have available. They don't want to allow people to do anything else.
I think you could make a platform like KPack could have a toggle that says operating system packages have to be satisfied by the base image, and like ignore the stack packs, right? If a mixin would need to be satisfied by a stack pack, then the build fails, right? And it tells you clearly why it fails. And then the platform author can decide, okay, I'm going to turn this looser functionality on for everybody because it's just LTS packages, should be relatively safe, and rebasing will could still work. Or I'm going to turn it off and just extend the base images, right?
It's like a platform API flag or feature is what you're thinking of, Stephen, there.
Exactly, yeah.
I assume you know this better than I do, but I'm assuming that there has to be some issues with some, I don't know, info security people in terms of allowing what packages are available. So
definitely, that's been a major thing throughout the whole. Yeah, for sure.
I think moving to stack packs really solves some of the uglier problems around creating an image that has root build packs, like a second builder image, essentially, because your run image could just come with the things you need on it already.
Can you say it again? I didn't follow.
If we're shipping stack packs on the stack images, it solves one of the uglier problems where you have to sort of dynamically construct an image that's basically a second builder image when you create a builder.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So we don't need to remove them is the other thing, right?
Yeah, I think we can just leave the stack packs there.
it could just be on separate layers, and then when you export to the image, we just don't include those layers, right? I guess it's hard on rebasing. No, it's not, because the source build pack will still have the source thing you're using to rebase against will still have the build pack on there. So I think you can have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah, either way, whether we remove them or don't, it's still a lot easier than having a second type of builder, essentially.
Yeah, we can definitely start not removing them. And because we're saying it's up to the stack provider, it's like, if you want a tiny stack, make a tiny build pack, right? Like, it is possible to make the stack pack really tiny. So,
Is it the stack operators who are writing these build packs though? I feel like that may not necessarily be the same people.
If we care about app packages, sorry.
I just feel like it's a somewhat dangerous line of thinking that, like, I imagine as a stack author, I'm probably hopefully pulling, like, I still feel like there's a registry case for this where it's like, oh, I will pull the generic like app package because I'm using Ubuntu or Debian and it happens to work because it's not like hard coded to just work against a distro. I still feel like there's a lot of advantage for having an ecosystem around it versus like every stack author or operator or whatever has to like build their own set of stack packs. Like, I think that's definitely not the path I want to go down.
yes, no, I agree with that. But I'm also much more comfortable with like early on not dealing with that and then exposing it through like the mixin, it's exposing or solving the end user problem through the mixin interface and just leaving that sort of hidden away for now and then opening it up a little bit later on.
To me, the author of the stack pack isn't the stack author like Paketo or Heroku, but the stack ID maintainer like io.buildpacks project, right? We've already moved to the consistent stacks, and an apt stack pack for Bionic, right, would probably be maintained by the CNB project in accord because the CNB project maintains that stack ID and would work well for both. Would work well across everything that's Ubuntu Bionic, right? And so that leaves us to make a stack pack, doesn't leave every single platform to make a stack pack, but it leaves the project to make stack packs for common Linux distributions. And then with that, yes, we have a registry, but it's a short registry, right? And it's for stack authors who, when they're creating their stack, want to add this type of safe mix-in related functionality.
I guess somewhat related, but maybe orthogonal question to the discussion around that is like, do you imagine that, say we have a CMB Bionic apt build pack or stack pack or whatever we're calling it, right? When we released 2004, right? Which I guess 2004 is right out because it's not April anymore. Or whatever like the next LTS is, right? Do you imagine that build pack will not work on that stack?
Build packs right now can specify more than one stack, and we could say that the apt Bionic build pack also supports Focal, right? Or we could say, actually, the apt parameters have changed, and you have to use a different stack pack when you go to Focal. It's up to us. We can make the right call. This would be my proposal. And it feels very build packy too, because it's like they can support multiple stacks.
Yeah, I guess I just imagine that like most people will probably just use our official apt one regardless of, just because it's the apt one, right? Like probably could even use it on Debian or something, right? Like probably does the right mechanisms.
On our side, we found that the flags for apt for different versions of Ubuntu, you like sometimes want to pass different things. It's like Debian non-interactive is important, but behaves differently in the older LTS releases, and there's just like slightly different things. But because we exposed the stack ID, right, you could just have one apt build pack for everything that's apt related, and it could support a million stacks, and then switch on the stack ID with different flags. Instead of having different build packs like. We have the world, or like we have a world of flexibility with how we do that. Just as long as we just do what we've always done and treat them like build packs in that respect. So like, yeah, agree.
So these stack packs would always run first. Is that kind of the idea here? Like, and only if obviously they'd be a part of the build plan. So only if they need to be opted in, right? If someone requests a mix in that's not there, but it knows it can provide, I guess it executes before all the other build packs. And there's no way to David's point, there's no way to opt out of that behavior. You can be like, you know, you skip whatever this is called, extensions or whatever it is. Besides on the platform, like I guess Pack would have to implement whatever the platform flag is as well to be able to give you the ability to produce images that don't execute that build pack as well.
Stack build packs run a detect phase?
I would think so for the build plan part of it, right?
Yeah, I'm just thinking, I'm trying to think through the case like where you'd want to disable them or something. Because like ordinarily you would just, like with a regular build pack, you'd just define your build packs and then none of the other stuff would run. That's not the same thing we want here though.
I really liked the, Joe, something you said earlier was like this, the ability to install packages should be really seamless to the developer, right? It should just work. And you shouldn't have to worry about like, you know, did I put this thing in this right place? Did I explicitly specify this versus not? I don't have very strong opinions about this, but assuming that stack build packs happen outside of the order and like always happen, and that you can configure them kind of separately from the other build packs. By default, they all run in all cases, even if you explicitly specify your build packs, but you could turn one or more off using a -- stack pack, right? A flag that overrides the stack packs, or -- disable -- stack pack flag that turns them off, right? That feels pretty like straightforward. And solves the use cases that I've heard people talk about.
Kind of the only thing I don't know, I'm not clear on exactly how like provides and requires would work, and I kind of wish like that's such a sort of loose coupling between build packs that I kind of hope it doesn't. Like I kind of wish it wasn't a part of that API. Like that's that's my only complaint about it being a part of detect is that you suddenly are like playing with other build packs like provides and requires, and I feel like that's kind of awkward.
Yeah, I thought through that too. I was like, I like doubling down on mix-ins. I'm not sure I also want to double down on provides and requires at the same time. I'd love it if it was separate, but then I also don't want to introduce a new like mix-in thing that's separate from the build plan, you know?
I feel like you could put it in the build plan, but it isn't provide requires. So I guess like you may have to take that up with Ben.
Yeah, but then it's just more in the build plan. I don't know if that really helps.
I mean, I guess to me, like I feel like the build plan is meant to be a communication mechanism between this stuff, and if it's not fulfilling that need, and we have to like do a separate thing for mix-ins, like what are we doing with build plan? Like, right? It's like it should be malleable enough for us to like do what we need to get it done as the communication thing, versus being like, oh well, as a build pack, please write this separate file called the mix-in plan. Like that seems terrible too, right? So it's like there's probably some structure around it that doesn't probably, I don't know, interact with the stuff, or restricts the things that Ben wants out of like the loose coupling, but is, I think specifically for mix-ins, you want it to be more structured. Like I think by definition, because it is dependencies, right? Like by definition, like we need it to have probably a little more structure than what the provide requires has, maybe. I don't know. This is me just spitballing, but
that structure could be determined by the stack pack though, right? Like it could be like it's a require -- mix-in, you know, field at the top, and the format inside of require -- mix-in is determined by the stack pack.
That's a little dangerous because then it might have implications on like this. I'm trying to make this build pack work with two different stacks. And
yeah, no, you're right. I think you're right.
That's the
I
part
think I'm
that
wrong.
worries me about like provides and requires. It's a little too loose to talk about like maintaining a single apt package across like every builder that's ever going to exist.
We agree that to put it in the build plan, though, it should be a different top level key, and then probably stricter schema under that top level key that's like, these shalt be the mix-in names, and that is all you can put here. Or something
I feel like the problem with putting in provide requires too is that like potentially you can conflict, or like you could imagine someone provided requiring a thing called mix-in or something. I guess we could disallow it, but that'd be like a break and change to some degree. It's like, go ahead, Emily.
given that everything else now lives under metadata, if we did have a separate key, then I don't think it can really conflict with things, which is like one of the benefits of having put everything under metadata. I think like you could do it with the build plan as is if you really wanted to, but I think it would be nice to do something more special so that detect can, if someone's requiring a mix-in and it's already set on the stack, it'd be nice if that just evaluated seamlessly rather than being treated as an unmet requires, which is why I think it'd be nice to have some
like
structure.
if you as an app developer require the mixin libpq, and the Heroku stack already provides that, so would the lifecycle just remove that from the mixins because it's already satisfied? Yeah,
I think it'd be nice because you wouldn't want to have a stack pack in that case, and you
right.
wouldn't want people to have to decide whether they're asking for it or not. You wouldn't want them to have to know whether it's on the stack. It'd be nice if we could just pull out everything we know already exists before evaluating the contract.
Yeah, it's like mixins I need.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, that sounds really good. And then platforms like KPack could still use stack packs to do base image extensions without having an application there, right? Based on user provides these mixins, they get past the stack pack, and you can apply it to Builder and then fan the new base image out to a lot of apps. So it works really well for that interface too.
All right. I'll rewrite the RFC.
I hear fourth time's a charm. Like that, right?
It's
So
fine.
is there?
I mean, it's fine.
Let me know if you
Just
want.
rewrite it until everyone gets sick of talking about it. That's the key to getting
Is
our
that Emily's strategy?
Yeah.
Is there still going to be the kind of more general root Buildpacks concept, or right now we're only talking about the stack packs?
Yes and yes, I think. Like, my hope is that yes, eventually. What's that, Jesse?
I was saying, I think that knife, the escape hatch we're talking about, should just be like a script, like a location of like scripts you can just like mount in or something to extend yourself. Like I feel like
this is crazy.
Buildpacks is the wrong abstraction for that super sharp scalpel. Like I just want to do this stuff, man.
What if they're inline root Buildpacks? Transition to the next.
I just don't want to think about provides requires, like to do something crazy. Like I just want to, in some cases,
I mean,
just want something
that's always been optional though, right? Like,
yes.
No one forces you to provide or require.
Yeah, but I don't even want to detect and stuff. Like I just want this to always happen. Like I kind of just want, like, you know how we have CNB/Buildpacks. I sort of want like CNB/ like unsafe, and it just has. If
that sounds like inline root Buildpacks. It's like
just
you're literally describing inline root Buildpacks.
Perfect. Sounds like a great segue.
For me, the only thing about that root Buildpack interface that I think I care about is, like, I agree, like, doesn't have build plan, all those things, but the ability to say either at the root Buildpack author's discretion, this thing is still safe for rebasing versus it's not safe for rebasing, and not having to play the complicated upgrade flow on top of it to be, add a lot of complexity. That feels good to me.
Are there stack packs that don't install ABI packages? Like, I guess like the CA cert one, for instance, right? Like that doesn't, like, I feel like we talk a lot because it's like probably the majority use case of, like installing packages in with mixins. Like, what is a stack pack? Like stack packs that do stuff that aren't package installation.
CA certs provide ABI compatibility.
But it probably doesn't do anything with mixins, right? Or does it?
The way we've defined mixins currently for Bionic, we don't have a way of expressing CA certs because they're not LTS packages and they're not a defined set, but we could. We could use the stack pack interface to do package installation just through different prefixes that we'd add to the mixin definition. And then you'd get the same replay behavior, right, that we wanted.
And stack packs don't have access to the application source?
They do, right? For like listing, or do they not?
During detect, they do. Is that right, Joe?
That's what we talked about. Yeah, that was one of the restrictions.
Yeah.
During detect, they do, but during build, they do not.
What's the use case for having access during detect?
Like you can imagine potentially like maybe like security configuration, like or something.
Yeah, bring your own Etsy password, or that sounds terrible, but like yeah, I think the original idea was like you might have configuration for that stack pack, like an apt.toml, which mixins kind of satisfy, but like
yeah, but maybe
that
sources
that
like
build.
app sources, right?
Yeah.
Which would break ABI compatibility. Something to think about, right? Like depending on how complicated that gets. Like if you could like add arbitrary sources, then like it may not always be a safe operation or something.
That would fall outside of what we're allowed to do with mixins too. But the app being able to express directly to the stack pack what packages to install, right? Exposing the app directory allows that, but I don't know if it's the only mechanism. It might make more sense to standardize on a mixins list in Project Toml and then feed that in through the build plan. That way the app developer can specify additional packages, Buildpacks can specify additional packages, and you don't expose the app directory to the stack pack directly. That would be,
Yeah.
I don't have a strong preference, but that would be a little more.
No, you're right. All the use cases I can think of, like Python, SQLite, Rails, FFmpeg, the build plan, like just using the regular build pack detect and asking for it in mixins or in the build plan would be fine, I think.
Yeah, I just think of like security stuff based off of like the app you get in is potentially a thing that you may want to have access. And it's fine if it's just at detect, right? Like detect could do the work to feed it into a build plan that it could itself read or something later on, right?
Maybe a root build pack is the solution for that stuff. That's not if it's not installing LTS packages.
Yeah, I'm mostly curious, like pushing the boundaries of what we consider a stack pack, I guess, is the point of the discussion, not I need this to be this way.
That makes sense. And my head is all very tied to how mixins are defined right now, which is pretty strict, right?
What about CA certs? Like, would you be able to pull those from your local workspace? Like, I guess if we have it in detect, you'd be able to copy them over and then during build, register them or something. But I know in a platform, you probably mount like certs at like an org level or something, right? And then that would just be like mounted into the container. So you'd have a known location or something to spin through and load up all the certs.
CA certs almost seem like a rebase save root build pack versus a stack pack use case. Me.
If we want to, I think you could model it as a stack pack and then do something in the platform directory. Like if you mount inserts in a certain location, then the CA cert stack pack installs them. You don't even need to use the build plan for that, really.
That makes sense. I feel like we're getting into the details now to some extent.
Yeah, let me, the CA certs one, like that's fine, but I don't think it hits every use case. But I'll start a new RFC, and then maybe that'll help us pinpoint some of these details that we do need to drill into.
Nice to see CA certs get some action, I guess, since Xander's left.
Did we want to talk more about root build packs? I just want to call out we have 10 minutes left, and Joe, you mentioned that you care about inline build packs, or you wanted to present inline build packs today too.
No, I mean, it's not important. We can punt on it. I just thought it was relevant. I put a space there in case there was anything else we needed to talk about. I can if we want to, though.
I guess the question is, do you want to?
Sure, I'll do it. I won't have time to, if we decide to do anything with this, I won't have time to do it, but I guess it's worth socializing the idea, pulling up the RFC.
I saw that one of the alternatives was a scriptless build pack, which RFC, which was closed a bit ago. I didn't have a chance to go through it, but what was like the issue that we initially saw with what was scriptless buildbacks?
The context was just really different. Like it was before we had settled on Project TOML, and I was pushing for like Buildpack TOML everywhere. And so one of the constraints at that time was that an inline build pack would be the same, like the schema to define it would be identical to a scriptless build pack, which is like not an inline build pack. So it could sit in its own repo, have its build pack TOML, but it wouldn't have a bin build or a bin detect, and that would all just be defined in the build pack TOML. So yeah, because I was in this state of trying to have Project TOML and build pack TOML be the same thing, there were just a lot of different constraints that don't exist anymore.
The other difference was also the scoping around it. Like we were trying to figure out what the scope was. So you have like the pack file project that Stephen has mentioned a few times. I don't know if you've looked at that. There's actually a Slack room for it, but just like cases around like how do you write layers? Like what's the like how do you reference a layer from like a different step in the thing across different build packs? And so just like it wasn't scoped in the sense that like it was trying to do a simple thing, but also like how much of the build pack API do we want to implement in it as well was another kind of thing called into question.
Yeah, there was some magic in it, you know, like automatically creating layers for you kind of thing. And none of that is in here. This is just an inline script that replaces bin build. No fancy stuff. Terrence and I were even talking about like, we kind of want to encourage people not to create layers, because I think that's really not the use case. The use case is potentially, you know, creating slices, but I think it's more likely that as an app developer doing this, you are doing something with your app code, or you know, like these examples are running rake war to generate a war file from, you know, your JRuby app, or running db migrate, not like installing something.
Yeah, and there's projects like Packfile, potentially if you want to basically build a build pack as a full-on thing.
This looks great and does not have, or like it's very different concept than Packfile that serves completely different use cases, right? This is just like build hook, and Packfile is like a new way of building build packs that's easy, right? And I'm, you know, like totally different outcomes.
Yeah, I see this is like, this is the use case where even Packfile is too heavy. You know what I mean? Like I just want to run this damn command, you know?
My use case for Packfile is almost like there's a large segment of users that are just never going to be comfortable running other people's build scripts, right? And if I can provide a framework that gives you all the benefits of build packs with none of the drawbacks of the ceremony, like puts as much of the caching logic that interconnects layers and expires them and rebuilds them into this thing. So it's just like you create a build graph, and you know you have this very nice build experience, right? That's based on the value of C and B without the all the responsibilities on your part, right? That's what I see Packfile for. This is like, I think we should ship this. It does not, it solves problems, and I'm not worried about it like being an alternative to what I'm working on. The only thing I have here is rake db migrate. You really want to migrate your database during your build process?
No, we don't, but people do.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. People do on Cloud Foundry also.
Yeah, I mean, I just put it there because it's an example of a one command, but definitely not something we want to encourage. But yeah, I mean, other things are like asset bundles to a CDN or whatever. I mean, people do it. I thought there were some interesting things in the comments, but they're not sticking out to me.
I had a question about who reads this, because I think you mentioned that the lifecycle would read Project TOML. I feel like.
Oh yeah, that was just a mistake. Yeah. I mean, I think a larger discussion is how do we provide something in lifecycle that can like pre-process a Project TOML.
When you don't have something like Pack doing the logic for you, like in a Tecton case, I think that
Right,
does make
but like,
sense.
for example, Lifecycle Builder would never be Project Toml aware. Like that preprocessor would take something like Project Toml as an input, and it would, as output, it would, I don't know, generate something that's like machine readable specifically for the builder, just defining the build packs or something like that.
I've become very convinced that we need another lifecycle binary called like platform light or something. And platform light is what you want when you don't want to implement a bunch of features that rich platforms should provide, because it's better if they provide them, like not uploading get files, right? And things like that, include and exclude lists, right?
Right.
But platform light is what you use when you're on Tecton or a more limited platform that implements that. And both Pack and platform light can use the same code to do the same thing.
Yeah, I like, there's that prepare step in the Tecton template, and so I was thinking it would be like lifecycle/prepare, like a prepare binary.
We actually had that at one point in time.
Did we?
And then it started doing less. It basically only choned a couple directories, so we got rid of it because there's no point in having a binary for that.
Yeah, right. That's what I was thinking. The other things it could do.
Yeah, maybe McNew can donate build in it.
We maintain
that basically does that, right?
All right. Yeah, that's. I think there's a couple things to address down here. I'll have to look over it again, but it didn't appear like anything big.
It's interesting with the shell. Like, I guess we're assuming that the shells are installed, like all the shells they may use.
Yeah. The separating, like, Emily had asked why putting this here, and that was the last time when we were doing scriptless. I know Stephen felt pretty strongly about having shell separate. I don't remember the full reasoning behind it though. If you do, Stephen.
There's a reason. Hold on. This is about wanting to have a separate, or being able to specify the thing that executes the script, right? Is the argument that, what's the argument against, or what's the alternative to having the shell be a separate thing?
The shebang.
The shebang.
But
I feel like that's just easier. One thing, put the shebang in there just like a normal script.
If you have the shebang in there, then you always have to have the shebang in there. How does the default?
Well, you could default to sh or dash or something, right?
But how do you detect that the script doesn't have it? Then you have to look in the script and see if it has a shebang and execute it. Where the operating system determines the thing, or detect that there's not a shebang line, and then explicitly pick a certain shell that's going to be the default shell that executes it, which we probably want to be bash in bash mode as opposed to bash in sh mode, or just sh or dash or whatever.
I'm okay with just requiring people to put the shebang in there. I feel like it's a script.
It seems like a thing that is almost always going to be the same thing everywhere, and a big part of this is just put commands, don't think about it, but I don't have an incredibly strong opinion. I already approved the thing. I'm happy to approve it with the other way.
We could also just like default that if there's no shell, then that's okay. It will do, bin shell or something.
Yeah. I think it should be shell is separate, but defaults to bin bash, and then you can override it later by specifying a different shell. And sorry. You can make a shebang work also, but
I don't care all that much. I'll be happy with it either way.
Pack file has a separate shell, so I'm a little bit biased.
I got a jet because I have another meeting.
Me too.
But
Alrighty, we'll see y'all next week.
This is great. I think Thursdays are still valuable.
I like Thursdays more than
Ben's
Wednesdays.
right.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks,
Maybe
everybody.
it's because Ben's not here. That's why they're better.